Jacoby. We
What
are
up,
Jalen
though?
and Jacoby. Jalen, what is it that we do?
We give the people what they want.
Jalen, tell the people who is joining us on the program right now.
We have a legend joining the show today, Mr. Chuck D of Public Enemy, bars, activist, artist, social, politically conscious, has been the pulse of the culture for decades. It is our honor to have you on the show, legend. And since it's been approximately 30 days since the unfortunate death, murder of George Floyd by the need of law enforcement, what do you feel like needs to be done in the pursuit of social and political change in our country?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to the Jay and Jack show. I catch you guys on the other side of the television. It's different being a participant, so it's a tripping me out for a minute. But yeah, it's a reachable and a teachable moment to tell us that young energy should be encouraged to do leadership. And this should be a country that should be able to encourage young energy into leadership at a younger age instead of the game where you got, people looking at a bunch of 70 and 80-year-old octa and septuagenarians running for the leadership of the nation. So I just think that in this teachable moment, it's about letting younger people know, and young adults know that when they do the schooling or whenever they do the training in high school or college or whatever they do in their trades or whatever, be encouraged to do that and go into leadership between 40 and 60 and then act upon their local areas. And that's where that immediate change got to happen instead of falling for the beauty pageant of the presidential election, which I think, of course, needs full attention. But then you have older people in the country that could focus on that, as well as looking into, making these changes while they were living in their local area. So I think out of this moment, since the murder of George Floyd, it made you look at the area of policing not being that one track street. Now, it needs reform. And what does reform mean? Reform is to make sure you and your local have the authority as citizens to have them come in and to police the area other than policing your own property, and they look at you as being kind of like outsiders anyway as they're policing it. And the fact of the matter is that you deal with people. Policing means dealing with people, not handling people. You handle animals and things. So it's a long way before we get to that road of what should we do. But younger energy has the collective. When it's collective, it has the ability to have immediate change happen, especially local, in front of people's faces. That's my political
Your
answer.
leadership. Absolutely. Well, your leadership has been a catalyst for decades to allow those voices to have strength and then be able to use that strength to unite change. And so for the NBA and entertainers, at some point it's going to be, quote unquote, time to get back to work. Do you feel like NBA players going into a bubble and playing basketball creates a distraction from the social and political change that people are protesting in the street every day?
I think people need a distraction, but they also need to pay attention. And if they pay attention and also are able to give in athletics and entertainment, you have mentors directly guiding athletes into how to gel into society. And I think in entertainment, in music, and in film, you don't have that. And I think, the ability of coaches and agents, general managers who have the concern about, I guess the athlete, especially when they tell them they better pay attention to society, it's one thing. But in entertainment, I think they pulled the game to try to make extend teenage years to 35. And I'm thinking anytime you do that, man, you have a problem, man. It's like you gotta you're 25 years old, you should be encouraged. Like, yeah, you have a great time, but you are a leader, and whenever you don't have that, you have a lot of people looking at 70 and 80-year-olds to run the country, and that's crazy, man. I believe in a mandatory retirement age, and serious administration is 65, man, and then it's a wrap. But if you don't adhere people in their 40s to their 60s, that they're leaders too, not only leaders of their locale, but on a bigger scope, then you're going to have these problems, man. You're going to have a problem when somebody feels that they can't have jurisdiction over their locale. So I think of the athletes, they have older people around them all the time that's telling them about the life and the game. And it behooves them to listen to them. And so I think they're a step ahead to where a lot of entertainers are. Now entertainers are listening directly to a lot of people that they know in the streets that know that they're in a case of emergency and urgency. And people like Steven Jackson and Bun B, you know, those two guys who grew up in Port Arthur, Texas, and they directly answer to this. One, because Steven Jackson's relationship with George Floyd, but then that was the catalyst that galvanized this energy anyway coming from the streets. So that's when people looked at entertainers as saying that take the first step into some kind of movement. And it came through a bad door, unfortunate, but it ended up, or it's happening, that movement is happening because people say, look, if anything, I got to look at myself to make change. And that's where that young energy is prevalent.
Well, you mentioned sort of younger NBA athletes listening to older people, and what advice would you give them? Like, if they're going into this bubble and they don't want them playing the game to distract society from the fight against social injustice, what direct advice would you give these NBA players on how they can use this bubble, this platform, to advance the fight against social injustice?
Organizations are always good. Collectives are great. And there's always an organization or collective full of aging people trying to find young energy, and everything ain't going to be popular. You know, you don't need pop stars to run, you know, your neighborhood. You know, you got administrators that train for that. And, yeah, it could be looked upon as being boring and not exciting, but, you know, not everybody is cut out to be exciting or entertaining, an athlete, you know, whatever, and out all right. So you got to pay attention to those details that make us, you know, live us every day. Give them more props. There's people that's in the community every day doing that ugly work, and they rolling up those sleeves. So commending them, and also knowing that that's a path for anybody to take if they put in the work is a good thing.
One of the things I think that has been a catalyst for white kids carrying Black Lives Matter signs and appreciating and respecting Black lives, I think a couple were rap music and entertainment. And now that I believe those things have gone mainstream, it's given a level of appreciation to that generation that you talked about that wants to see change. But there's always been a word that's kind of been, I guess, divisive on all sides. What do you think about the use of the N-word in pop culture?
Well, I did a song called STD, and I think you said similar. It's a word that's been passed back from slavery. It's a slavery-transmitted disease. And you can't get rid of a word, but you should understand its context. And that's what we try to tell people that use word text of the word, of the N-word, has magnitude that you can't take lightly. It is such a word, but if you just can't throw it around frivolously. So that's something, and people should be watchful when they use the word. It's nitroglycerin when you really look into it. Nitroglycerin has its purposes, but also can blow you up at the same time. So that's what the N-word is. And in this state of time right now, it is, you know, a lot of people, even young people right now, are starting to look at it as being inappropriate. Although, in context, the treatment of Black people as such is going right back into the use of the word in an appropriate manner.
That's a really good point, Chuck. I want to thank you so much for joining us on the television segment. Everyone watching this, don't forget exclusive content with Chuck D on the Jalen and Jacoby podcast. We have an update on Giannis Antetokounmpo. We'll give you that in just 2 minutes. Stay tuned on our podcast. Jalen, the Bubba Wallace noose saga continues. Bubba Wallace's team found a noose hanging in his garage, and then the FBI investigated it as a hate crime. They determined it was not a hate crime because the noose had been there since October. Now, the NASCAR has released an image of the noose, which is very much a noose. Jalen, what does this image tell you?
I don't know why they don't consider it a crime, but either way, it's still hate. And yes, it probably wasn't there specifically for Bubba Wallace because allegedly we didn't know what garage he was going to be in, but it doesn't make it better that it's been there for a year. But then they try to spin it as, oh, this is just how they tied the knot as they pulled down the garage. And so clearly other people have seen it over that period of time. And it doesn't make it even better that it was 2019 or 1959 for anybody to have to show up to work and see a noose readily available.
I think the FBI is right. This was not specifically a hate crime against Bubba Wallace. I think it's actually worse. I think this is a hate crime against all black people that has been seen over and over again by people since October 2019. And it took this long for someone to speak up and say something. I've seen a lot of ropes used to pull down garage doors. You've seen the tennis ball on the end of them. Sometimes there's a knot at the end of them. I have never, ever, ever seen a noose. And for someone to take the time to tie this noose and fix it to that garage in that place is a hate crime and is an act of bigotry and racism. There's no other way to it. Jalen, moving on to the NBA, they're going to return to play in Orlando, and Coach Bud of the Bucks said that Giannis is 100% healthy, and that's going to give them a huge advantage. Are they your favorites to come out of the East?
I don't want to pick against Giannis, my MVP from this year, because he showed me that he could do outstanding things these last couple of years, leading the Bucks to a number 1 seed. But in the shotgun scenario, in a bubble in Orlando, I'm going with the squad in the East that has at least 4 players that could get me 20 points constantly if they needed to. And that's the Boston Celtics with Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown, Kemba Walker, and Gordon Hayward. I just think as offenses break down, the game is going to be a lot more sloppy. It's going to be less passing. It's going to be a lot more guys just trying to get their shots off the dribble. And I think the Boston Celtics have a myriad of guys that can not only defend but get their own shots. And that's going to give them an advantage in the East, in particular against the Bucks.
Interesting. Well, Jalen, today is the day that we finally learned it was Vince Carter's last year. He will not return to the NBA. We will celebrate the career. Welcome back to Jalen and Jacoby. Jalen, we all kind of knew it, but now we officially know it. Vince Carter has announced his retirement. What are some of your favorite memories from Vince's career?
A terrific athlete that was more than a dunker, Jacoby. Could jump off of 1 foot, could jump off of 2 feet. Think about it. Michael Jordan could do both. Not many people could do both. Backwards dunks, 360 dunks, arm hanging in the rim dunks between the legs. And how about 1998 Market Square Arena? He drives the left wing past Chris Mullin, double pumps backwards over Rick Smits, the Duncan Dutchman. I remember going into the locker room at halftime like, that guy gonna be something special. Congratulations, Sergeant Vincent Lamont Carter.
Congratulations, Vince Carter. I want to thank Chuck D for coming through. And I want to remind you to listen to our podcast where we always have exclusive content. We'll be back on Monday on ESPN at 4 p.m. Dan Le Batard and Holly Quest.
Righteous bobbing and weaving so that the good get